Hello everyone. Morning. Thank you for being here and welcome to Ravensbourne. It's an absolutely great pleasure to be here today with so many leaders, business folks, students, alumni, staff who are shaping the future of work, skills and talent across the UK. And we're here to celebrate our recent accreditation with the Chartered Management Institute, CMI. And that means that every Ravensbourne business student who graduates from the university has a degree with a world-class stamp of approval. And this really does give our students an essential competitive edge when it comes to the jobs market and the world of work. And I'm especially delighted to welcome Francke, the Chief Exec of CMI, to give the keynote address in a few minutes on the importance of bringing together technology, creativity and business leadership. It's really important. We at Ravensbourne believe that developing new talent at the intersection of these three areas is absolutely vital for the next generation of global leaders. We're living through a period of extraordinary change. Technology is evolving at an incredible pace. You know, you just have to look at the news around AI and all sorts of different technologies. Business models are being disrupted. Global competition is getting more and more intense. And the skills that really innovative and high growth organizations need today and will need in the future tomorrow, they're changing faster than most traditional systems can keep up with. So after Anne gives us her keynote this morning, she will join a really brilliant panel of accomplished guests from across business, technology and the creative industries. We have Lisa Opie here, who happens to be Chair of the Board of Governors here at Ravensbourne. He's got a very impressive career in organisations such as Channel 5, BBC Studios and latterly Ubisoft Reflections, as well as being the Chair of ScreenSkills in the UK. We've got Professor Les Binet, who's a visiting professor here at Ravensbourne. He's a global leader. Whenever I mention the name Les, people tell me he's a guru of the advertising world. And Les, really, you focus around marketing effectiveness. And you've had a long career in advertising with companies like Adam and Eve DDB, so we're very pleased to have you here. And Annie Brown from Brand Finance, who's a valuation director specialising in banking, insurance and asset management. And I think, Anne, your first question today was you heard of Annie's work valuing football clubs and the return on investment around football clubs. I won't mention Manchester United this morning, so I'll be chairing that. I'll be chairing that discussion after Anne's keynote, where we hope to understand and explore how industry needs are rapidly changing and the importance of creative technology and business in that. I just wanted to say a few words, if I may, because I've got the podium, to introduce Ravensbourne. Okay, so we are a specialist university that focuses on providing education at that intersection of creativity, technology and business. And we're based here, well, you know, we're here together next to the O2, but actually in the heart of London, where those three aspects, you know, provide London and our students with a fantastic opportunity. You know, London is amazing. It's the heart of the creativity in the UK, but also heart of the tech sector and also our business and industry heart as well. And Ravensbourne's mission is very simple, which is to develop the next generation of creative leaders, technology leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs and business leaders who can thrive in a very fast paced and changing global landscape. And it's really important because our graduates, our students, don't just learn theory, they learn how to apply their real life skills to real world challenges. And we do this because it's really where innovation happens, where those three things come together. And we believe that the future workforce the best way to skill up the future workforce is to encourage them to work on either work with industry, learn with industry, understand the needs of industries, and also to adopt and help them address some of those challenges. And creativity is a really important driver of innovation. So we are a creative institution, really championing creativity across not just the creative industries, but also across technology and business. So what does this mean for universities and employers and businesses? Well, we believe that engaging with business is absolutely crucial to helping our students to get equipped for future world of work. And this is what businesses and employers tell us is really important. Now, lots of universities say that. We try and demonstrate it. It's always, rather than saying we do this, it's always better to demonstrate how we do it. So I am just going to play a quick 3-minute video. Kelly's going to change around just to give you a little bit of an example of how we learn with industry.
My name is Andy Nicholas. I work for Britvic and I am the brand lead for Aqualibra, which is within our Breakthrough Brands team. Britvic is a soft drinks company. It has 39 brands and it's sold in over 100 countries. It has household brand names that we would recognise in Great Britain, such as Robinson's, J2O, but also we have some kind of more innovative brands like the London Essence Tonics, Aqualibra and Purdy's. So at Britvic we do a lot of outreach with universities and schools, and I think it's really, really important to kind of stem and ignite those passions in people from an early age. The students here at Ravensbourne, because they've had that engagement with businesses, with entrepreneurs, with agencies, with creative agencies, they've just got that extra little bit of knowledge and expertise that maybe somebody that hasn't gone through that experience can pull from. It's so useful, so helpful that when they go into interview moments, when they go into kind of portfolio moments, that they can pull lots of examples, lots of experience, and that really kind of makes companies, it makes employers feel safe in the hands of these people that they're recruiting to kind of push their businesses forward. So what I think is really important at the moment, especially if we're looking at graduates coming out of university or new talent, is looking for that innate curiosity, so that adaptability, that flexibility to change. If we think back 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been having the same conversations about AI that we are today. So we need to keep at the forefront of technology and of trends, and we'd be looking to our new talent and our graduates to be bringing that enthusiasm and that passion for emerging trends and to kind of keep us at the top of our game. What would help Britvic the most working with Ravensbourne will actually just be that continuation of that creativity, pushing the boundaries for our brands. So what we really love when we work with the students is they're kind of out of the box thinking. They bring some real fresh perspective that we don't necessarily have in-house, and so it's really great to kind of look at things a little bit differently, look at it with an eye from a generation that we're not in, and really kind of push our expectations of our own brands. I think our partnership with you going forward, with Ravensbourne going forward, if you think about creativity, technology and business, that's in everything that we do at Aqualibra within Britvic. We are a business and we need to keep moving and keep progressing, and so to come out of a university with a creative degree but you also have some commercial acumen, it will set you up for success for the future for sure. So I'm really looking forward to continuing the relationship between Britvic and Ravensbourne in the future.
Just before I introduce Anne, so CMI accreditation and leadership development, and this is why we're here today. So CMI accreditation really represents so much more than a badge. It reflects a shared commitment to professional standards, leadership capability, and development of an effective and ethical future-focused leaders. And that's why we are so proud to achieve CMI accreditation and so proud to have Anne with us here today. And I'm going to ask Anne to come up to the stage, but not before I introduce you properly, which is to say that you're Chief Exec of CMI, and under your leadership, CMI has played really a pivotal role in shaping the future of management and leadership capability across the UK, and a passionate advocate for professional management, inclusive leadership, and ensuring that organisations have the skills and the standards they need to achieve success in a really complex world. So please, a big round of applause for Anne Francke.
So I too have a video. But I also want to say that Ravensbourne for me has always a special place because I joined CMI over 12 years ago, and one of my hiring interviewers at that time was also the then chair of Ravensbourne, and he's here today, Andrew Summers. So I'm delighted to have come full circle and be working with you again. I also have to say I was incredibly impressed on the way up here to go through your library and was marveling at your materials lab. I have not seen one of those before, and I think it's a great example of that kind of practical dimension that you're championing. And then, by the way, just on the football thing, the best managed team from an ROI perspective, not Arsenal, Brentford. And we are playing Brentford, we were playing Arsenal tonight. So, and there you go. Anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about, but I couldn't resist. Now, hopefully, this is, yes, okay. So those of you who may not know about CMI, I won't bore you, but we are the only chartered professional body for management and leadership, and we do champion best practices and set global standards for best practices in management and leadership, and we keep those up to date. So over the last 7 years, we've had to update them 3 times for 3 big trends. The first was inclusivity, the second was sustainability, and we're now exactly in the process of updating them for AI, which is a very interesting topic I'm sure we'll touch on. We have about 230,000 members across business and education providers, and we do work with people in 170 countries, but predominantly our partners are in the UK. About 85% of our partners are here in the UK. Increasingly, we are seeing interest in what we do internationally, which is a good thing. I've put our vision and mission up here. This is straight from the Royal Charter, but actually what we say is we take accidental managers, and I'm going to come back to that, and turn them into confident, competent, inclusive leaders. So that's really why we exist, and our values all begin with P, progressive, practical, professional, and passionate. So that's just CMI in a whistle stop. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the accidental manager, why it matters, and what we can do about it. So, you may not know this, but 1 out of every 4 employees in the UK is a manager. That's 8 million people out of the 32 million people in our workforce. And stunningly, 82% of them are promoted into those managerial roles with 0 training in management. And those are our accidental managers. They are functional experts. They are great in finance, great salespeople, great IT, great architects, whatever it is, product designers. So one day, because they're really good functionally, someone taps them on the shoulder and says, congratulations, you're now in charge of the people and the money. Good luck with that. And they don't give them any training. Now, you know, how are you going to know? It's very different being a product designer versus leading a team of product designers. How are you going to manage those skills? And it is something that you do need to work on. And yet, even at the more senior levels, 1 out of every 2 managers still don't get trained. So 80% don't get trained when they're appointed, but, you know, 10 years on, half of them still aren't trained. This really is a big deal for the economy, for organizations, and for individuals. And here's just a little bit of why. So the UK, as you may know, in the OECD rankings, does lag the US in productivity. One of the experts, the consultant to the Treasury, John van Reenen, did a study with another UK expert who's actually now at Stanford University, Nicholas Bloom, and they concluded that about half that productivity gap was down to management practices. interestingly, what we did at CMI was just we looked at one ads, vacancy notices, and vacancy notices in the US are much, much more likely to specify management credentials and capability in the job descriptions than those here in the UK, which will still rely largely on the functional capabilities that you have. Now, Skills England, a recently formed arm's length body to look at skills in England, flagged that management does remain a critical occupation, accounting for about 25% of all the roles in critical demand, and yet, incredibly, 40% of organizations in the UK spend no money on training. And that actually is a number that's going up, not down. So it really, this is not something that we're solving ourselves. Now, for individuals, who's ever worked for a bad boss? Raise your hand. There you go. Okay. How did it make you feel? Demotivated? Frustrated? Knackered? Yeah? Maybe, right? Yeah. Angry? Maybe doubting yourself, right? So nobody's sitting there thinking, it made me really want to get up in the morning and go to work. And it really doesn't, right? And in fact, if you rate your manager as ineffective, our research says that 1 out of every 2 people working for that bad boss is going to leave in the next 12 months. Which, again, illustrates that this is a problem on every single level. It's a problem for the economy, it's a problem for organizations, and it's a problem for individuals. So what do we need to do? Take the accidental managers and transform them into confident, inclusive leaders, which is why the work we're doing with you at Ravensbourne is so important. And now let us see if this video works.
The world is full of potential. Potential that's often overlooked, underestimated, unseen. For so many, the path to leadership isn't a straight line. It's uneven, and it takes courage just to begin. Leaders are built, not born. We are the Chartered Management Institute. Step by step, we develop and support leaders at every level in every career. Not just at the top, but from the very start. We champion the emerging leader with pathways that open doors and build confidence. Because the aspiring managers of today will lead your teams, your communities, and your organizations tomorrow. We partner with employers, educators, and leaders who share that belief. Belief in potential. Belief in people. CMI. Future leaders start here.
Now, I will say that all of those people in that video are real CMI students. They're not models or actors, and they're great spokespeople, and if you look at our socials, you'll find their stories. And they'll talk about things like, I had imposter syndrome, and I went to the wrong employer, and I wasn't valued, and it took me, I had the confidence because I did my CMI qualification to say, this isn't good enough for me, and I found an organization that valued me. Those kinds of stories. So I would encourage you to look at those, because they're very compelling. Now, what does training do for people? Well, trained managers significantly outperform untrained managers on a whole bunch of characteristics. They're much more likely to trust their teams. They're much more likely to feel comfortable leading change, something that is incredibly important in this ever-changing world. And they're much more likely to feel comfortable calling out bad behavior, and including for bad behavior against themselves, like that young man that started in a place where he wasn't valued and moved to a place where he was, and now he's thriving. So we also know that employees with trained managers are significantly more likely to feel fairly treated and included at work. So much of inclusivity is about the behavior you experience on a daily basis. And it's not about the sort of virtue signaling of, you know, turning your website a particular color for a particular week. That's very performative. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. I'm just saying don't mistake that for building an inclusive culture, because it's not. It's training your managers and getting them to do these things, the calling out of bad behavior, the giving of feedback, the listening and the coaching, and the trust. And I was asked on the way up here, you know, how universal or specific are these things? And in my experience, 80% of the principles of good management and leadership are indeed very universal, and maybe 20% are tailored to the particular industry. And it's interesting because every industry probably thinks it's the other way around, right? You know, every industry thinks, well, you know, managing at X is absolutely different than managing at Y. But at CMI, working with all the organizations that we do and constantly researching this, we see really there's a huge amount of commonality into the principles that make and develop good managers and leaders, which is why we're firmly of the belief it can be, you know, built, not born. You can learn this stuff, and that's why we do what we do. Now, our dual accreditation, because one of the things that we also do is measure the impact of what we do, because, you know, we're a charity, we have to measure our impact, and my own background is things like P&G and Mars, both of which have a very strong belief in line management, but also in measuring impact. Our dual accreditation does get students significantly better jobs. We measure that, and we use the Delhi data. We work with JISC to measure just very objectively CMI accredited versus non-accredited, where do they land? And so we really do help you get those skills to get you better jobs when you go into the workplace. We also know that if you become a chartered manager, we measure the impact of that. And actually, AI is very interesting because it's going to help us do that even better. But just in the aggregate, when we look across our chartered manager population, we have measured the impact independently, and we find on average our chartered managers are getting pay raises. They're making impact for their organization, so on average they're delivering £59,000 of benefit, whether that's cost savings or revenue growth through innovation or better processes per year, and we measure that over a period of 5 years. And when you ask, well, why is that? It's actually that last stat. It's because we're giving them the confidence to lead. And it's confidence born through competence, which matters. And 90% of them are saying, yep, that's what my takeaway is. So it really is an impactful designation. And when you look at the employer perspective, we know that employers are much more likely to trust chartered managers, maybe more likely to give them an interview over similar candidates that don't have that status. And of course, despite the fact that 82% of people are promoted into management with no training, 85% of employers say, well, of course they should receive training before they're promoted. So that's a complete, you know, conundrum and a contradiction that unfortunately needs to happen a lot more. And of course, it is also important that employers believe that a degree that comes with a CMI award and certification has extra credibility for the people applying when it is CMI accredited. So those are just some of the impact stats that we do measure and keep updated regularly. Now, I know that we're going to talk about this in the panel, but one of the things I said we were updating our credentials to how do you manage and lead in the world of AI. And what is really interesting, and what we've done to do that, is a lot of research, but also expert interviews with people like the ex-CTO of McKinsey and Matt Britton, who used to lead Google, and lots of others. And we've also done the research about the research that's out there. And in the age of AI, the people skills are becoming even more important. So the ability to exercise judgment, the ability to lead ethically, the ability to manage change, the ability to communicate, all of those essential management skills are going to become more important, not less important. I was just reading yesterday something from the McKinsey Global Institute, and that corroborated exactly the same thing. So don't let anybody tell you that, well, it's all going to be done by robots. No, because it's going to be the people managing and leading, actually people and robots. We're all going to have to learn to manage agents as well as people simultaneously. But that means that your skills of judgment and ethics become even more, not less important. So those managers are built, not born. What I was sharing with you is even more important in the world of AI. So please do. Many of you will. Well, 1 out of 4 of you will end up in a managerial position. Please do take that very seriously. Your line manager, as those of you who raised your hand will know, has the biggest impact on your well-being at work. That's, again, a fact that's proven in our research and that of others. And actually, when you're a good manager, that's still true. Who's had a good boss? There you go. How did that good boss make you feel? Yeah. 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 Exactly. So we all know this, right? And it is so important. So invest in developing yourself, right? You're not a finished article as a manager or a leader when you leave here. You have to keep developing yourself. You have to keep developing those skills as you progress. And of course, I would say this, and one of the best ways of doing that is to keep stay in your CMI membership when you leave and get chartered. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? So thank you very much for listening.
What's inspiring and reassuring is that leaders are built, not born. And so, this is, as you say, this is what CMI does, but also is absolutely what Ravensbourne does as well. So the idea that we can train people. I was especially welcome panelists, and we all met in the green room before we came up here, and we started quite a lot of the conversations around businesses that encourage things like side hustles, in innovation and things like that. I'm especially interested in emerging skills for business. And Annie, you say that 80% of leadership skills are universal rather than sector specific. And of course, we've got some panelists here who have deep sector knowledge. So I don't know whether, I'm kind of going to ask a couple of panelists whether they agree with that or whether that's contentious. So Les, I'm going to start with you if that's okay.
Well, actually, what you said totally struck a chord because, so I worked in an advertising agency for a long time, and my role was kind of almost like being a consultant within an agency, which meant I spent a lot of time talking to lots and lots of different kinds of businesses, and they'd always say, our business is different, We're not like other. They're all the same. The same challenges come up again and again. So there is a great deal of commonality, I would say.
Thank you, Lisa.
And they may not be.
I'm going to ask Lisa.
So I made a big move from one sector to another. So having spent more years than I'd like to even mention, because it makes me really old, working in television, and most recently at BBC Studios. I oversaw production at BBC Studios. I then moved into the video game sector, which, if anybody knows anything about the video game sector, that's quite an unusual thing to do. And it was probably one of the best things I've ever done. Having worked in a really quite established sector that, of course, relied on enormous creative innovation constantly, to go into one that was so alien to me, and one where I had literally not even really appreciated the depth and breadth of creativity that existed within the video game sector. I didn't, front of mind, know that it was bigger than film and television combined and has nearly 4 billion players worldwide. And all of that was an immense learning curve for me. But it was a real test of my management skills because, of course, I'd run big organisations. BBC Studios, we had 20,000 employees. And I suddenly found myself in an environment where I knew nothing about I didn't know how to code. I didn't know how you made video games. So I was entirely reliant on the skills that I brought as a leader and as a manager, which fortunately, because it was another creative industry, and it was a difficult creative industry in terms of the technological challenge of making video games, I learned an awful lot. And I think a lot of what I already knew was incredibly relevant, and the ability and the opportunity to learn was probably one of the best things I could have done. I would highly recommend people to move from sector to sector.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Annie?
I'd approach it from a slightly different angle in terms of research that we conduct into what makes good leaders all the way at the top of organisations. So we produce a study each year about perceptions of top CEOs, and something that's been really interesting in the last couple of years is there's been a lot more mobility between sectors and between companies of CEOs. And historically, we used to see that 80% of the top CEOs were appointed from within the organisation. They'd worked their way up. They typically had a very functional, technical background that qualified them to become a manager, but didn't necessarily have the management skills. But what we are increasingly seeing is that now, in the latest time we did that study, is 50% were appointed from external positions. Because people were seeking change makers who could come in, and it wasn't necessarily that they had sector experience or understanding of the company that was important. It was that they had specific skills in understanding people, how to motivate people. And some of the top CEOs in that ranking were those who had HR backgrounds and marketing backgrounds, weren't necessarily the traditional CFO or CTO route from internally or founder-led. And I think that's been a really interesting recognition of this theme that the other panelists have spoken about, that it's not just necessarily staying within the lane that can help moving forwards. Yes, significantly. I mean, within 1 year, we saw from 80% to 50% of appointments were from internally within an organisation. I mean, that was at a time where suddenly we had AI coming on for organisations, and so they suddenly needed new skills and change and an ability to adapt to that. Sorry, I'll share the microphone.
Jump in, Les. Yeah.
So you talked about the accidental manager, that thing of people feel like promoted beyond their competence. I speak from experience here. I'm not a professional manager, never have been. I was an accidental manager, not that one. But there is this thing that in this country, there's a tendency to assume that if you want to be senior and well paid, you have to progress up the management ladder. But not all companies work that way. Do you have a view on which is better?
So it is true that organizations generally are becoming, because of the pace of change, less hierarchical. Those that are thrive are going to be the ones that are less hierarchical, because if you don't empower people to make decisions, you absolutely cannot keep pace with change. And one of the things that you asked me about, who do I think is an organization is well led, and I gave the example of Timpson, a small family-owned business. Because they really empower their store managers. But I also want to give the example of a big business, and it's run by an ex-P&G alumni. I do think P&G has a lot of leaders because they invest so much time and trouble educating people to be good line managers from a very early age. So Greg Jackson, founder of Octopus Energy, now Kraken, leading entrepreneur, and he is a great evangelist for excellent leadership and management that does not revolve around hierarchy. Actually, he doesn't have an HR department. Can you imagine the size of business he is? And that's no disrespect to HR people, but he wants everybody to feel accountable and everybody to feel able to contribute and to innovate. And he allows them to do that. And his secret, which I think is also a universal thing that all good companies do, was actually to say, all right, these incumbent utility companies, they can't move because they're huge and they're bureaucratic and they have legacy everything. So what if I started a utility company from the simple perspective of what does the customer want? And he built it backwards. because, you know, we all don't like our utility companies or our banks, right? So he did that, and he created an incredible customer-first, innovative, non-hierarchical culture where people thrive. So I think that's another really good example of a refreshingly innovative approach.
One of the things I'm thinking about is that I presume there's a lot of people here who are designers or tech people, or who they love their craft or their skill, and they don't want to be promoted away from it.
So one of the things, I think you're absolutely right, but just because you're technically masterful at a certain skill does not necessarily mean that you're a good manager, as we all know. So I think increasingly, if you look at the video game sector as an example, thinking about having dual courses for promotion so that you can have people who are expert in their field. So when we were looking at Ubisoft at how we develop our career path architecture, having two pathways, one of which is to say I'm going to become an expert in engineering and coding, and the other one is becoming an expert in leadership and business, and recognizing the skills and the separate skills of both of those. And actually, it's a highly, highly collaborative craft. It involves the contribution of many, many people, thousands of people, often split across the world. So the ability to get to it, to enable collaboration and good, sort of delivering good management skills was absolutely critical to the health of a project, but so too was expertise. So recognise both of those is, I think, absolutely the way to go forward.
I seem to remember that there's a story that Sorry. It's only a small room. Bell Telephone Labs, the legend anyway is that part of the success there was you could be a techie and get right to the top without ever having to do management because they had a dual career structure. So I think it's quite interesting what you were saying about professional managers then moving more across industries, and of course they can port skills and learning from other industries.
Well, the question I wanted to ask, Annie, sorry Lisa, I'll bring you in, but the question I wanted to ask Annie was, seeing that cross-sector move, and brilliantly said, look, the payback for individuals when they get CMI accreditation and membership is this percentage. I just wonder whether you actually factor in leadership and certain aspects of leadership when you're valuing companies and thinking about their value.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good example of a CEO who came from across industry, and it was quite a big change for the industry because it was the new CEO of Chanel. She's been there for a couple of years, Lena Nair. She came from global head of HR at Unilever, and with that, she's brought significant change to the way that Chanel is seen externally amongst customers by starting internally and demonstrating to employees that they're really trusted and valued, and building that culture from within, which for an iconic brand like Chanel is so important and really helps to reestablish both the values of the brand and then the financial value of the brand. Because what we know is that amongst people who are deciding whether or not they're going to spend a lot of money on a nice handbag, they want to know that handbag has been made by a team that are passionate and cared about and treated well. And people are more proud to show that they are purchasing products from Chanel, for example, and show that logo on their purchases if they know that the employees are treated well. On the other hand, you have companies where people may be happy to buy from them because functionally it's easy, it helps them purchase what they want to get, for example, Amazon, but people might not necessarily be happy to, and they've had issues in the past that's less significant now, but they've had issues where people don't want to tell their friends that they're buying from Amazon because of awareness of mistreatment of employees. And that's something that, again, we saw in our CEO research, was that the top driver of reputation of CEOs is whether they are seen to genuinely care about their employees. And then sort of bringing that back in terms of just personal experience, I think delegating is a really hard thing to do when you're new in management. And if you're highly technically capable in a creative industry or in a technical industry, learning to sort of let that go and manage is a really hard thing for people to overcome. But also I think empathy is one of the most important skills to learn. And I think that starts, from your first exposure as a line manager all the way up to being CEO. It's the most important skill, in my view, for management.
Thanks, Annie. That's really important. Lisa, did you want to add something? Oh, yeah. Well, look, I feel, because the panel session is... so we're going to open for a Q&A in a second. So I'm just giving you a little bit of pre-warning. Get your questions ready. But one of the things I wanted to talk about really was the role of creativity in leadership and management, because as I said earlier, we really teach not just the effective professional business skills and leadership skills, but also the importance of that. So Anne, I just wonder whether you wanted to say a few words on that, and then we'll start open. No, because I want to ask you in a second.
So the reason creativity is so important, it correlates with agility and solving problems differently. And those skills are enormously important in the rapidly changing world that we're in. Because, if you are creative, you can see where others see obstacles, you see opportunity. And again, I go back to my Greg Jackson example. What he said is, when the regulator slammed all the energy companies, everybody was like, oh my goodness, we're going bust. We have to cut 30%. And I was like, no. Actually, if I just looked at this differently, I see an opportunity here, right? And this is where he got the inspiration to build his company. That's a real life example that comes from Greg himself. But I think for all of you, creativity is an essential skill for managing and leading in an agile, empathetic, and laterally thinking manner. And what you've said about CEO switching is very, very true. And actually, what your point about, there is always a role for the individual contributor. So if you don't want to line manage people, you should be able to thrive. But even in video games, as you said, where you're collaborating with diverse teams across the world, if you don't have good managers overseeing that, you're not going to get a good video product. So I think both are very important.
Lisa, your career has been in the creative industries, as has Les's. So, I mean, do the best creatives make the best leaders, or vice versa?
Not necessarily, but I would say I think most businesses are creative. So I think there's a tendency to think that it just sits in the purely creative sector, and I actually think that that most businesses need to innovate and think freshly. I think what's really important in creative environments is that people feel safe. And I think difference is incredibly important in creative environments. So to your point, it's why hierarchical leadership is often the death knell of creativity and innovation, because actually what you need to do is to listen to the ideas of others. The best thing I think as a leader, and one of the things I loved about working in video games is I literally had to sit there and go, I don't know, you tell me. And that would be somebody who was 21. When I worked in TV, it was often very much the same thing when we first used drones in natural history programs, and we had to get people who played video games in to operate the cameras because they were the best at operating drones. So you learn from different perspectives, I think. One of my favourite books of all times is Matthew Syed's Rebel Ideas. And if you haven't read it, do read it, because I think he lands so powerfully how important it is that you listen to the views of others. So for me, it doesn't matter whether you're a hierarchy, you're a leader and managing people, or you're working as a subject matter expert within an organization. The ability to listen and learn from others remains absolutely critical. And the ability to collaborate increasingly across disciplines is really, really important.
Thank you. Les, before we ask the audience for questions, anything to contribute to that point?
No. Of course. That was the creative answer. I think creativity is one of those things, it's a very vague term, really, isn't it? And I think you can see that we're talking about different kinds of creativity. I mean, and you're really focusing on the creativity in problem solving in business. And every job has a dimension of creativity. It's technology, invention, innovation is about creativity. You're talking about a different kind of creativity, I think, which is creativity in the product, which is getting more towards like the power of commercial art, if you like. And that's obviously where I come from in advertising. I think that's tremendously powerful, and many people in business don't fully appreciate the power that silly things, play, art, just kind of messing around and producing, things that make people feel something. The link between creativity and emotion really is what I've spent 30-something years doing about. And it's tremendously powerful in financial terms. It's what you do, basically, isn't it? Is measuring the financial value of that stuff. And for all of you in business, I'd really urge you to think about the magic of creativity, the magic, the emotional power of creativity, and how that generates financial value. Because in an advanced economy where people increasingly buy experiences, not things, where symbolic value is a big part of the value equation, it's one of the ways that companies make money. So, the magic.
I think that's really super important. It reminds me, so we had a chap from TikTok in a few weeks ago, Lisa, didn't we? And he helps partner with organisations who are looking to raise their profile and awareness and reach on TikTok, etc., etc. And he said he worked with a company, Duolingo, who had a strategy, but actually the biggest thing that resonated to increase the reach was just someone dressed up in a big owl costume, and it suddenly went viral all over TikTok. Not something you could plan, but something very much that could tap into, I think, what you're talking about. Is a great example.
And I can't remember which of you said it, but about the safety, about, that was you. So it's really important that people have got permission to have stupid ideas. Yeah. Well, failure's not an option. But
do you know that 54% of video games fail? And when you think that, so I'm just picking you up on a point, and when you think that a AAA video game can, in rare cases, cost as little as £200 million to make, and the more expensive one, Grand Theft Auto 6, currently sitting at about $2 billion and 9 years. So failure is really common, and learning how to fail, I think, is a really important thing to know.
I was joking.
No, I do agree with that. And also what you said earlier about, as a leader, saying, I don't know, right? Not enough leaders say, I don't know, you tell me, right? Because that requires humility. It requires, self-awareness, the ability to listen. And what is sad is there are, and we've talked about some of them, some companies where they're trying to dial the clock back. You must be in the office every single day, 5 days a week, from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. Why? Right? That's ridiculous, right? But it's because they can't move beyond their own value set. And one thing I think is very important that somebody taught, actually it's a Gen Z thing about, who knows the platinum rule? Everybody knows the golden rule, right? Well, the platinum rule is not, treat me as you yourself would like to be treated. The platinum rule is, do unto me as I would like to be done unto, which means that you have to actually spend time figuring out what the other person wants, what makes them tick, what's going to resonate, and it's that listening and empathy.
I'm going to use that later. Great, thank you. So hopefully we still have time for some questions. So hopefully someone in the audience has a mic ready to go around. Thanks, Tim. So please pop your hands up and we'll take a few questions. Got a question at the back there. If you'd like to say your name and who you are or what you're studying or what you teach or yeah.
So Daniel is my name, so I'm on the MBA team. My question goes to and Frank. Of course, anyone on the panel member can chime into my question. So from your experience, what role will you say accountability plays in leadership development? Because it's really critical, because we need to bring this home. In a contemporary world where we have, a leader like Donald J. Trump, who is accountable to no one, and we also know accountability plays a critical role in leadership. We can see the current situation, even here in the UK, with the Prime Minister being held accountable for certain decisions. So what role will you say, from your experience as leaders, will you say accountability plays in leadership development, and what's the ongoing role to that?
Accountability matters hugely. And unfortunately, and I'll just, I'm American as well as British. And what you're seeing, very unfortunately, in the leaders of these very big countries is not the way in which most people would like to be treated, right? So there is an increasing disconnect, very unfortunately, between the principles that we've been talking about and the principles that the leaders of the largest countries exhibit in their behavior. And that's all I'll say about that.
I could actually say so. So I think one of the things I think is quite interesting about being in a creative environment, and I don't know that this is tied, but I think that actually structure and process and good governance is really important in a creative world. Because if you're going to feel safe, you need to understand the framework that exists around you. And within that, accountability is a part of that. Who is clearly accountable for making this decision? And do I know who is making this decision? And can I point to them and go, why did you make that decision? Are all things structure makes for safety and makes for greater creativity and innovation, because people know the role that they play. So I'm not sure if those two things are connected, but it just occurred to me as Anne was talking. We need to know the rules, and you can't change the rules weekly.
A really good example of a company that has put rules in place, particularly in the space of AI innovation, is Microsoft. So they created a 27-page internal document, which is their rules and code of conduct for how AI is created and what the principles are behind that. It's quite reassuring that one of the companies at the forefront of AI innovation is putting that in place to reinforce their values internally and create that sort of principled trust in the organization, that so much of what big tech companies are doing with AI is not transparent to us as everyday consumers, but knowing that they have those principles in place, I think, is so important, and continuing to introduce new governance frameworks as new technology and capabilities come on, I think, is very important.
Thank you, Daniel, for your question. There's a question down here. Oh, wait, sorry. Yes, go for it.
Thank you. Hi, Rachel Farrer. Firstly, to say thank you, really fascinating conversations and panels, and I've really lived a lot of what you've spoken about, because I was part of a very straightforward sort of hierarchical career. I did a CMI accredited MBA that was absolutely transformational, and I now work as a freelance consultant, so I do a lot of what you spoke about, Lisa, of sort of going between different sectors. I've done work in screen, video games, performance, as someone that doesn't really know all the answers or all the people, but you're trusted to listen and ask questions and synthesize and spot opportunities. But if I think back to kind of when I graduated and I did a creative degree, I didn't see that sort of trajectory or pathway ahead of me, and I didn't recognize all the skills that I'm now valued for, like empathy and creativity and agility. You just see a quite straightforward trajectory of what you want to do. So I'm interested, my question is how you sort of see, being in the context of a university, young people or emerging professionals coming in, are they going into jobs or careers in a more open-minded way, or is there still this sense of, I'm following this pathway, and then it's not until you get a bit older or more experienced that you suddenly realise, hey, I can go anywhere I want? Or are people feeling different about that?
All the panels are sort of
champing at the bit.
so I am going to take a few answers. So who wants to go first?
Go on. So I'll try and be very quick. So it's really interesting to now be involved in education, having spent a long time working in industry, and to look at that critical relationship because I think for people coming into the workplace, they do have different expectations. To your point, that will constantly change and evolve over time. And now, you know, as an employer, you're looking at managing and leading people who span a hugely different approach to work and have a very different sense of the expectations. So I think it's never been more important to work really closely with industry and education together to define what those needs are. We do. Industry does underinvest in skills in the UK. You're absolutely right. And if I look at the video games sector as an example, there it's quite chronic in comparison to TV, where I'd say it's an awful lot better. But it's really critical that it's a constant, learning is constant. It's never going to stop. You don't just rock up on day one. And especially because technology is moving so fast. So that ability, the curiosity, the aptitude for learning is absolutely critical. And I think, you know, the industry needs to adapt in order to make sure that graduates want to continue to work with them. So there's change on both sides, I think, is required.
Your question resonated with me because of personal experience. So I was a physicist, and I ended up some years later looking at videos of cartoon cats and looking at people's emotional responses. And you're thinking, how did I get there, you know? I don't think any kid, you know, coming out of school has any idea what the world will be like when they eventually enter the world of work. And they have very little idea of what options are really available to them, what their own strengths are. You don't, it takes a long time to get to know yourself and what you're good at. So flexibility is really important. At the same time, we also need specialist skills. So there's this constant tension between mining a seam and kind of becoming a specialist in some area, and also having this flexibility to move from one area to another, to learn new things. So at a personal level, I think that means having a wide range of interests, a curious mind, an ability to, you know, go off in a different direction. The education system and the way we structure work also needs to work with that. I don't know if that's changing. I don't know if we've cracked it. I don't think we have with the education system.
Well, what I wanted, we haven't. I mean, some education, for example, schools are still rated on how many kids they get into university, right? And, you know, university is important, but actually schools should be rated on, you know, the quality of preparation for future employment rather than, you know, what university the leavers go to. So that's one thing. But a data point I wanted to share, which is fascinating. There are 5 generations in the workforce, which is your point about all the different generations. The average baby boomer, over the course of their career, and everybody's working longer, by the way, because they have to and because they're living longer, has 6 jobs in the course of their career. The average Gen Zer will have 22. So there you go. There's that, I think, really underscores this point about adaptability, about finding your strengths. And the stigma, right, when I was in the workforce, if you moved a job after 3 years, people go, why? Now it's like, you know, you see CVs of 30-year-olds and they've had 7, 8 roles. And they're just like, well, you know, that's the way it is, right? So I do think people are going to be more agile, and the employers that get that are going to do a better job of attracting and keeping, which is hard, talent.
And Annie, did you want to add anything? And then I think we got time for one last question here at the front.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is that even amongst the youngest generations, we're seeing quite a fundamental shift in terms of attitudes towards not only work, but also institutions more broadly. In the Edelman Trust Barometer that they brought out last year, they found that 60% of people worldwide now have absolute distrust in institutions, and that's something that's particularly pronounced amongst the sort of younger Gen X group, 13 to 22-year-olds. So I suppose for the current generation of people coming into the workforce, it's not just thinking about your skills and how you can adapt to that, but also thinking about how you can motivate this next generation of workforce that's going to be coming through that has quite significant mistrust in traditional institutions, NGOs, businesses, whereas a lot of their trust actually relies on the community that they have, which often is found online and is increasingly driven by AI algorithms and obviously becoming more polarized. So I think one of the other key challenges for new managers is thinking about how you continue to motivate and inspire that next generation that have developed quite significant mistrust.
Thanks, Annie. Thank you. So we've got time for just one last question. So
Hi.
off you go.
Hi, good morning to all of you. I'm Dawa, Associate Professor in Digitech from MBA and Master's Program. Now my question is actually two questions, quickly, very small. One is, as you, Seema said, like in your explanation, you said bad manager and good manager. So good manager is a good manager, and can bad manager could be a good manager, and what CMI does for any training for them. And the second question is very quickly, who is actually have a good relation, bad manager or good manager with the organization? Thank you. And I'm one of your member in 2004 when I was an MBA student, and since now I'm working with CMI, so I know.
And are you a good manager?
I'm not a manager. I'm a lecturer, as I said. Thank you.
Okay, so can bad managers become good managers? It was really your question. And the answer is yes. And they often do. And I'll share a story, a personal story very quickly. When I was mid-career at P&G, I was managing an incredibly large project. It was, hundreds of millions of pounds across Europe. It was a major launch, and I was highly, highly stressed. And one day I came in, and my team, there were 3 or 4 of them, said, "We need to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And so they did. They came in, we shut the door, and they said, "You know what? You walk in here every day, head down, you don't say hello, you don't look at us, you just go straight to your office, you slam the door, and then the only time you talk to us was you stick your head out and you bark, where's that recommendation, or where's that?" And that doesn't work for us. And it's stressing us out, and we don't feel valued. And I went, my initial reaction was, like, you want to get defensive, right? So, but you do not lash out. I just thought, okay, you're right. I reflected, you're right. And it was a huge wake-up call. And so I changed my behavior. And we went on to have a great team, and it's still one of the most successful launches that P&G has ever done. So I went through a period of being a bad manager. It can happen. You can go through things in your life. So to all the bad managers out there, don't give up.
So look, unfortunately, we could go on talking, and the questions are still abounding. We can't do that because we're running out of time, but I think there will be an opportunity for you to talk to our panelists outside, because there are teas, coffees, refreshments. All 4 of you have made it super easy for me to chair, because you've just gone off and said some brilliant stories and talked with each other about leadership management. The takeaways I've got, that figure of 40% of organizations do not invest in training. It's a killer stat, isn't it? The idea that Gen Zs will have 22 employments, that they leave bad managers, bad leaders, as well as having increased distrust in the organizations perhaps that they work for. People leave organizations as well as their managers. All of that, as well as the changing nature of technology and creativity, I think it just enables us to think how important good leadership, good management is. And that's what we do here at Ravensbourne very, very well. So thank you for listening, and please join me in thanking our brilliant panelists. Thank you very much.